Instead of using Excel to store your RSVPs for your next event, use a SharePoint list instead. A SharePoint list makes it easy for you to view your RSVP data in multiple different ways with a few clicks. In this Microsoft Power Automate tutorial, I'll show you how to get your Microsoft form responses into SharePoint. I'll cover how to build a Microsoft form with conditional fields by using branching. You'll learn how to format your multiple choice responses for a SharePoint multi-choice column, as well as converting it to text. I'll also show you how to take a text response and convert it to a number with a switch action and with an expression. After adding the response to SharePoint, we'll send the user an email confirmation with all the details of their form submission. At the end of the video, I'll show you a few tips and tricks on working with a SharePoint list. In Microsoft Forms, create a group form. This will make it easy for anyone on my team to make changes to it. To create a group form, select your group, then click on New Group Form. Give your form a name and add a description. By default, the form is set to only collect responses within the organization. This automatically logs the responder's email address. In Power Automate, we'll be able to use the Get User Profile action to return the responder's details. Microsoft has recommended some fields for my form. I'll select this field and add it to my form. I'll manually create the rest of my form fields, so I'll click on the X here to hide these recommendations. I'll edit the answers to keep it simple. This particular event has a cocktail party before dinner. To demonstrate how to get multiple choice selections from Microsoft Forms into SharePoint, I'll add a choice field and toggle on multiple answers. For a better user experience, utilize branching in your Microsoft Forms. This will allow you to hide certain fields based on a selection made. If a user selects no to the question above, they don't really need to see the rest of the form. This will improve the user experience as they don't need to scroll past the other fields to submit their response. To add branching to a form field, click on the three dots. Select Add Branching. Each option has a Go-To drop-down beside it. Use these drop-downs to select what field you'd like the user to go to if they've selected that particular option. If a user selects yes, I'd like them to go to the next field. If they select no, I'd like them to go to the end of the form. Let's preview what that would look like. Click the back button to go back to the previous screen. Click the preview button at the top of the screen. I'll add an additional choice option to allow the user to indicate if they'll be bringing a guest. I'll add another choice field for the meal options. I'll duplicate this field and edit the question. Those are some interesting suggestions. I'll toggle on long answer for this field and toggle off required. Lastly, I'll add branching to the guest question. This way, the option to select a guest meal will only appear if the user is bringing a guest. I'm going to drag this field above this one. Let's preview the form. Click on Style to select a theme for your form. Once the form is ready to go, click on Collect Responses. I'm going to copy this link and open it up in a new tab. In Power Automate, create an automated cloud flow. Give your flow a name and select the When a New Response is Submitted trigger. At the time of filming this, there isn't a way to select a default designer, and Microsoft Power Automate defaults to the new designer. You'll need to switch to the classic designer to follow along. Select your form. If you don't see your form listed here, you'll need to grab the form ID from the form. To get the form ID, go back to the window with the form link. Click in the link field and scroll until you see ID and an equal sign. Highlight the ID and copy it to your clipboard. To use the ID on your clipboard, select Enter Custom Value. Paste the ID. Add a Get Response Details action. Select your form or paste the ID if you have it on your clipboard. In the Response ID field, insert the Response ID dynamic content. Save your flow and run a test. Submit a form. Instead of having to submit a form every time you run a test, use a manual trigger instead. This will save you a ton of time while you build your flow, as you can build your flow off of a form that has already been submitted. First, take note of the response ID. Delete this trigger and insert a manual trigger. Enter the response ID from your previous test run. Run a test. In SharePoint, create a list to store your Microsoft Forms submissions. For my SharePoint list, I'll rename the title column to Staff Name. Since this is an internal event, I want to attach the user's Microsoft profile to their RSVP, which we'll use in a different tutorial. I'll add a person column for that. Next, I'll add a number column to store the number of attendees. I'll select 0 decimal places for this column. Since the form allows a user to select a meal option for themselves as well as a guest, it's a lot easier to manage those selections in a SharePoint list by storing the selections in a text column. However, I'm also going to show you how to take a Microsoft Form choice selection and translate that to a SharePoint choice selection. I'll add a single choice column for the staff meal choice. Next, we'll need another choice column to store the multi-choice response for whether they will be attending cocktail hour and dinner, or one or the other. I'll insert 2 choices and toggle on Allow Multiple Selections. I'm also going to show you how to store a multi-choice response into a text field. I'll add a text column to store the RSVP choices selected. Add a multiple lines of text column to store the allergies and dietary restrictions text. Lastly, I'll add 2 more columns, one to store the check-in status and the other to store the table number, which we'll be using in a different tutorial. The SharePoint list is ready to go. Let's head back over to Power Automate. The SharePoint list will only be logging users that will be attending the holiday party. For that reason, we'll add a condition check first to see if the response to the first form field is yes or no. Add a condition action. In the first value field, insert the dynamic content for the first form field. Leave the operator as is equal to. In the second value field, insert yes. Run a test. Keep in mind this field is case sensitive. If you are using the is equal to operator, the text you enter in the second value field must match the output of the dynamic content in the first value field. If I change this to lowercase, the condition will be false. We'll add the rest of our actions for this flow into the yes branch. Add a Get User Profile v2 action. This action will return the user's Microsoft profile. In the User UPN field, insert the responder's email dynamic content. Next, we'll need to return the details of the form response. Some response answers will need to be formatted before we can add them to SharePoint. In SharePoint, the attendee count column is a number column. However, when a user selects if they'll be bringing a guest, it returns a text value. We'll need a way to convert the text response to a number. I'm going to show you 2 ways you can do this. The first way will be to use a variable and a switch action. The second way will be to use an expression, which is my personal preference. If you are new to Power Automate, the switch action might help you to better understand the flow logic. First, we'll need to initialize a variable at the root of the flow. A variable is a container that holds information. It can store different types of data. We'll need an integer variable. Remember to rename your actions to keep your flow organized. I like to use scope actions in my flow to group my actions together. Scope actions help keep my flow organized, and I can quickly collapse multiple actions with a single click. Add a switch action. A switch action is a control that allows you to add branching paths based on the value entered in the switch. Each branching path you add is referred to as a case. The value entered in a case must match the value in the switch. In the On field, insert the dynamic content from the Guest field. The options in the form are yes and no. If the user selects yes, we need to set the variable to 2. In the Equals field of this case, insert yes. Keep in mind, the values entered here are also case sensitive. If you have multiple cases, remember to rename them to keep things organized. Add a set variable action to this case. Set the variable to 2. I don't need to add an additional case for when the user answers no, as I can use a switch default to set the variable to 1. Run a test. Personally, I like to use compose actions in my flows. I try to avoid using variables when I can, as it can speed up the flow run and reduce the number of actions required in my flows. Add a compose action. We'll need to use an expression to return a number based on the selection for whether the user is bringing a guest or not. Add the equals function. Click on the Dynamic Content tab and select the dynamic content from the form response. Add a comma and single quotes. In my case, I'll enter the word yes with a capital Y. This expression is checking to see if the choice selected is equal to yes. If it is, it'll return true. If not, it'll return false. Run a test. Let's take a look at the outputs. It's returning true. Next, we need to wrap this expression in an if function. The if function takes 3 parameters. The first parameter is a condition that returns a Boolean value, aka true or false. The second parameter is the value that is returned if the condition is true. The last parameter is the value returned if the condition is false. Click on the expression label to edit the expression. At the start of the expression, enter if with an opening bracket. Press the down arrow key to go to the end of the expression. Add a comma. Because I need to return an integer, I'll enter 2 for the true value. Add another comma and enter 1 for the false value. Enter a closing bracket. If you'd like to return text instead of a number, make sure you use single quotes and enter your text between the single quotes. Let's run another test. Instead of using a variable and a switch action, we can use a single compose action. I'm going to delete the variable and switch action in my flow. Multi-choice answers from your Microsoft form are returned as a JSON formatted string. We'll need to convert that to an array. Add a compose action. This compose action is optional, as we can use the expression directly in the next action. However, for demo purposes, I'll be using compose action to show the output. Insert an expression. Use the JSON function. Click the Dynamic Content tab and insert the dynamic content from your form that contains the multiple choice response. Run a test. This is what the response is returned as from the form, and now it's an array. Next, add a select action. We'll use this action to format the choices in the array so they can be used in the SharePoint list. In the From field, insert the outputs from the compose action above. Alternatively, you can insert the expression directly into here and get rid of the compose action. In the Key field, insert the word value with a capital V. In the Value field, insert an expression and use the item function. Run a test. The input of the select action is an array, and the output of it is an array of objects. Because the choices in my SharePoint list are cocktail party and dinner, we'll need to get rid of that extra text here. To do that, we'll use a split function. At the start of the expression, enter split with an opening bracket. Press the down arrow key to go to the end of the expression. Add a comma and single quotes. Between the single quotes, enter a space and an opening bracket. Press the down or right arrow key to go to the end of the expression and insert a closing bracket. This expression will split the text string at the space and the opening bracket, essentially returning an array of values. The text before the space and opening bracket will be the first value, the text after the space and opening bracket the last value. Wrap the entire expression in the first function. Place your cursor at the start of the expression by pressing the up arrow key. Type first with an opening bracket. Next, place your cursor at the end of the expression by pressing the down arrow key and insert a closing bracket. Press Update. This expression will return the text before the space and opening bracket. Run a test. If you'd rather store your multiple choice answers from your form in a text field, we'll need to return a string of text. Copy the select action. Click on the three dots and select Copy to Clipboard. Add an action. Click on My Clipboard and insert the select action. Clear the value field and click this icon to change from map mode to text mode. If you still see any additional characters, delete those so you are only left with the expression label. Add a join action. In the From field, insert the outputs from the select action above. In the Join With field, insert a separator. I'll insert a comma and a space. Run a test. By removing the key from the select action, the output of that action is an array of text. The join action takes that array and converts it to a string separated by a comma and a space in my case. We're ready to add the response to SharePoint. Add a create item action. Select your site address and list name. For the title field, insert the display name dynamic content from the Get User Profile v2 action. For the staff profile claims, select Enter Custom Value. Insert the mail dynamic content from the Get User Profile v2 action. For the attendee count, insert the output from the compose action storing the count of attendees. For the staff meal and guest meal, insert the dynamic content from the form. For the staff meal choice value, we'll also insert the dynamic content from the form. Because the value returned from the form matches the choices in SharePoint, additional formatting isn't required. The RSVP value is the multi-choice column in SharePoint. Click on this icon to switch the mode and insert the output from the select action that has the array of objects. In the RSVP text field, insert the outputs from the join action. For the allergies and dietary field, insert the dynamic content from the form. I forgot to set the default option for this column in SharePoint, so I will select Not Checked In. Run a test. Let's take a look at the SharePoint list. All of the information has been added to SharePoint. Adding an email confirmation to this flow is optional. Users have the ability to save their response if they choose. If you check off this option in your form, users can get a link in an email to view the form responses. Personally, to improve UX, I would send a confirmation email with the details in the email body. Before adding the Send an Email v2 action to my flow, I always like to format any content beforehand in Compose actions. This saves time while building the flow as I don't need to wait for an email to arrive. In the confirmation email, I want to include the number of attendees and the meal selection as well as the allergy and dietary restrictions, only if the user has filled that out. In the case that the user is coming solo, we'll need a way to conditionally display the text for the guest meal choice. If the user isn't bringing a guest, we won't display the text for the guest meal choice. Add the equals function. Click on the Dynamic Content tab and select the dynamic content from the form response. Add a comma and single quotes. In between the single quotes, enter a value. In my case, I'll enter the word yes with a capital Y. This expression is checking to see if the user has indicated they'll be bringing a guest. If they select yes, it'll return true. If not, it'll return false. Run a test. Let's take a look at the outputs. It's returning true. Next, wrap this expression in an if function just as we did previously near the beginning of the video. Insert if and an opening bracket. Press the down arrow key to go to the end of the expression. Add a comma and single quotes. In between the single quotes, insert the true value. If the condition returns true, which means the user will be bringing a guest, we'll need to include the label, which is guest meal choice. If the condition returns false, we'll return nothing. Add a comma and insert a set of single quotes and a closing bracket. We'll also need to display the guest meal choice. To do this, we'll need to use the concat function. Wrap the true value in the concat function. The concat function allows you to combine two or more strings into a single string. Each string needs to be separated by a comma. Place your cursor just before the first single quote mark of the label. Type in concat with an opening bracket. If you look here, Power Automate bolds the current parameter you are setting within a function. You can use this to help guide you while building your expressions. Place your cursor after the closing single quote mark and enter a comma. Insert the guest meal choice dynamic content from the form and add a closing bracket. Click Update and run a test. To bold the label text, I need to wrap the strong HTML tag around the label text. Add another compose action. We'll use this compose action to store the text entered into the allergy and dietary restrictions field if the field isn't empty. We'll use an expression in the empty function. Select the Dynamic Content tab and insert the Allergy and Dietary Restrictions dynamic content from the form. This expression will check to see if the field is empty. Wrap this expression in an if function. Insert if and an opening bracket at the start of the expression. Press the down arrow key to go to the end of the expression. Add a comma and insert the true value. If the condition returns true, we'll display nothing. Insert single quotes. Press the down or right arrow key to go to the end of the expression. Add a comma and single quotes. Between these single quotes is what is displayed if the field is not empty. Add the strong HTML tags and insert the label text between them. Press the down arrow key to go to the end of the expression and add a closing bracket. Wrap this text in a concat function. Add a comma and insert the dynamic content from the form. Add a closing bracket. Run a test. Add a send an email V2 action. Whenever I use a send an email action in my flow, I always insert my email address into the recipient field while I'm building and testing the flow. If it helps, you can add a single line of text to your email that confirms who the email will be sent to when your flow is ready to go. For the greeting, I'm going to insert the user's first name. We'll need an expression for that. Insert the split function. Click on the Dynamic Content tab and select the Display Name Dynamic Content from the Get User Profile action. Add a comma and space between single quotes. This expression will split the display name at the space, essentially returning an array of values. The text before the space will be the first value, the text after the space, the last value. Wrap the entire expression in the first function. Place your cursor at the start of the expression by pressing the up arrow key. Type in first with an opening bracket. Next, place your cursor at the end of the expression by pressing the down arrow key and insert a closing bracket. Press OK. This expression will return the first name. I'll insert text labels and dynamic content into the email body. Run a test. With some additional HTML and CSS, you can transform your email confirmation into something like this. Give this video a like if you're interested in a tutorial on how to style your emails in Power Automate. Before publishing the form, let's take a look at the form settings. To ensure that there aren't any duplicate form entries, I'll check off one response per person. I'll also set the end date for the form. Let's set it for the following week. I'm going to check this checkbox to disable the question numbers. To customize the thank you message, check this box and type in your custom message here. This last checkbox will allow the respondents to save the responses. Because I've added a confirmation email to my flow, I'll leave this unchecked. Finally, let's adjust the trigger of this flow. First, I'll save a copy of this flow with the manual trigger. I always like to keep a copy of my flows with a manual trigger, as it can come in handy if I want to make changes or troubleshoot any issues I might be having with it. Next, delete the manual trigger and insert the when a new response is submitted trigger. Since my form isn't displayed on this list here, I'll select Enter a Custom Value and copy and paste the form ID from the action below. Replace this response ID with the response ID dynamic content from the trigger. If you are sending an email confirmation in your flow, don't forget to replace your email address in the recipient field with the email address of the user who has submitted the form. Let's run a test. I've received a confirmation with my form details. In SharePoint, the form response has been added. I prefer using SharePoint lists over Excel mainly because I can interact with my list in many different ways. I can filter and sort my data, quickly display totals for my columns, and group my data. Create custom views so that you can quickly toggle between them in the View menu. For this particular view, I want to group the RSVPs by staff meal choice so I can quickly see how many meals per selection are required. There are a couple ways to build a view. The first way I'll show you is by hiding and rearranging columns right from the SharePoint list. First, create a new view. Ensure that your view is currently selected before you start making any adjustments to your list. Once you're happy with how your list looks, click on the View menu and select Save View As. By default, the view name will be your current view. Click Save to overwrite and save your changes. I'd like this view to display the groups collapsed by default. To do this, we'll need to edit the current view. Scroll down to the Group by selection and choose Collapsed. Click OK to save your changes. Another way to create a view is by creating a new view, then selecting Edit Current View. I'm going to use this view to display the guest meal choices. Using the Edit View page allows me to quickly uncheck the columns I don't want to display. Instead of using the position drop-downs, I prefer to rearrange the column order in the list by dragging and dropping. I'll sort this list by title column in ascending order. I want to filter my list by items that have a guest meal choice. I'll change the operator to is not equal to. This will filter out list items that do not have a guest meal. I could also use the attendee column and only filter items with an attendee count of 2. Scroll down to the Group By section. I'll group the list by guest meal in ascending order and display the groups collapsed by default. I can now rearrange my columns by dragging and dropping. The last tip I have is that you don't need to create a view. You can filter and sort your list however you choose and share the URL. How do you currently manage RSVPs for your organization's events? Let me know in the comments down below. If you found this video helpful and plan to create a flow like this to manage your RSVPs, please consider giving this video a like. If you're interested in learning how to manage check-ins digitally with a Power App, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on that tutorial. Thanks for watching!